All right. I think your mic is muted, Steve.
No,
No,
it
no,
was. I was just calling. I was just calling my dog back so he didn't chew up the mic.
okay. Hello, everyone. We are going live right now on Horizon Hobby Facebook page and the Horizon Hobby Products YouTube channel. We are also going to be sharing this through to the eFlight Facebook page, the Hangar 9 Facebook page, and also the Spectrum RC Facebook page. So you may be seeing those things there. You guys can actually put comments wherever you're watching this, and we will be able to see those comments, potentially share those comments later on. But before we get too far down the road, I want to introduce Mr. Steve Petrotto is joining us again as another host today, our Director of Marketing for the Air brands and the radio brand Spectrum. And we also have our very special guest today, which is the RC Geek. And his real name is Chris Wolfe, for those that people don't know.
I should have put that in there, shouldn't I?
You're all right. You're all right. We put it in the description, so most people should be able to see if they look down into the comments and whatnot. They should be able to see the little bit of history that we have about you. It was interesting to read that and to see where your nickname came from, and we'll get to that here in a minute. And I want to let everybody know that what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of talk to Chris a little bit about where he or when he learned how to fly, what he learned to fly on, and what are some of the things that he's really into. And then at the end, depending on how long he's able to stick around, we may grab some comments from the audience and questions from the audience to give to Chris and get his answer. And then maybe toward the tail end of the show, we'll just take some general comments and questions. So I would say this, try to hold your questions until towards the end, because we're probably going to miss them in the interim. We'll try to write them down and catch them if we can. But it'll be better to save them to probably the last hour, half an hour of the show or so. So without further ado, let's get things started. It looks like we've got a pretty good, decent amount of live viewers.
Oh, yeah.
All over.
Welcome, everybody tuning in from all over the world on this lovely Friday afternoon.
Oh, there's Steve's dog. He always tries to make an appearance. There he is. We see him now. And Chris is actually joining us from his workshop, which is pretty cool. And I think he is he mentioned it's a little hot.
The mess behind me.
It looks like a workshop.
It's a workshop, man. You should see my shop.
Yes. So, Chris, for the guys that don't know you, tell us a little bit about when you started in the hobby, where kind of your inspiration to get started in the hobby came from, when you started, maybe also what your first airplane was, if you can remember that.
Oh, man. So, my dad, right? I learned this all from my dad, is Larry Wolfe from Jet Hangar Hobbies. He was a pioneer in RC jets back in the day. There were three big guys, right? There was my dad, Larry Wolfe, there was Tom Cook, and there was Bob Pilot. And they were the big three doing jets, and they all really had the same common goal, right? To make jet modeling commonplace at the field. And so my dad always focused more on kind of the smaller models, the 45 size ducted fans. So I grew up in the back of a hobby shop, had just an absolute blast. I have so many fun memories building models back there and just kind of hanging out with the guys. But my dad tried to get me to fly for a long time. He'd bring me out to the field, and I'd enjoy watching, and I was really kind of hesitant to actually step up to fly. And so I ended up, we started this thing. We started going out on Christmas Day to go fly. And so we went out to the field, and one day I'm just standing there watching my dad, and he just hands me the transmitter, and he's like, here you go. And I flew. He had given me some lessons before, but I was kind of not interested. And then I was playing with like flight simulators on my old Commodore 64. And so, it just kind of clicked. I was 11 years old. And that was when the bug really struck me. And so I think it was a SIG Astro Hog that airplane was. And then I had a 4 Seasons 40 that was a Breedy design that I flew for. That's what I essentially learned on. I had an Enya 53 in it, I think. I don't know.
It was a powerhouse back in the day.
Yeah. And so, I flew that for a while. And actually my dad, so we were involved in an air show team called the California Air Show Team. And so we traveled across the state and to other states, performing at air shows, full scale air shows, and so I kind of got involved with that in the process. And so my dad gave me a Royal Zero kit for Christmas one year, and so that ended up being my first scale project. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the old Royal kits, but
aluminum cowl.
Yeah, spun aluminum cowl and a complete forest in a box.
Yep.
So
die cut, not laser cut.
Oh no. Yeah, and so I put that together. Gosh, it took me a couple years because obviously going to school, and I was in high school at the time. But I got really inspired. I wanted to finish the airplane for a U.S. Scale Masters qualifier. So I ended up meeting that goal. I think I was 17 or 18 when I finished the airplane, and I flew it a couple times and then ended up selling it. I tore the gear out, and I was like, oh man, I was really discouraged. And then ended up selling it and went to college, and so ended up building some other stuff. But that's how it kind of all started. So
you mentioned simulator. Was there a simulator for Commodore 64 way back when?
I think it was like there were a few. It was the old school
Dave Brown?
Microsoft Flight Sim back then.
Oh, yes. I remember that. Yeah.
Pretty bad. All the blocky graphics and stuff. But yeah, I played on it for quite a bit.
Yeah, that does. It's interesting. I've tried to explain this to guys in the world today. They have great simulators. Real Flight is a phenomenal simulator. But back in the day, we only had those polygon graphics and there were no physics, but it did teach you eye-hand coordination. It at least got you to understand, when I do this with my fingers, this is what's happening while you're still looking at a screen or, down the road looking at an airplane. So to this day, I tell everybody, you should have a simulator. If you want to be a better pilot, you want to learn how to be a better pilot faster, simulator is the best way to do it, hands down.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you crash once in the sim and it's already paid for itself, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Steve, I don't know if you know a lot of that history in the jet world, those old brands, and they were using like glow engines.
Well, I came into the hobby when, it wasn't that long ago. It was only, I don't know, when I was, what year was it? Like 20 years ago, I feel like it was. I don't know.
Yeah, 20 years ago. That was right at the verge of turbines.
Yes.
So late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah,
that's when turbines were really coming online. And my dad actually was the first one to fly a turbine, I think, in Southern California or something like that. He had an old Golden West turbine that he put in a Cougar airframe that had been hanging up in his shop for a long time, and flew phenomenal. And that so there was the old JPX turbine, which ran solely on propane.
Yes.
And had a real kind of hissy sound to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Golden West turbine, and that actually had a really nice growl to it. It used actual kerosene, and you had to start it or preheat it with propane. And it was a cool little turbine. The fuel economy on it was awful. And I don't think they're that much better now, but the airframes have gotten so big and you can carry so much fuel, it doesn't even matter at this point. So
yes, things have changed a lot in the turbine world, and obviously there really aren't any glow ducted fans anymore. And I remember my first jet was a glow ducted fan. You probably remember this. Do you remember the Kyosho? It was an F-86.
Oh yeah,
start 15 engine.
Did you actually?
That was my first jet. Oh,
Dude.
barely. So I lived in Las Vegas, and I didn't even think about this when I was that age back then, that we were like 2,500 feet above sea level. And that thing, I put in the recommend, I want to say it was 30% nitro, and it barely flew. And then I ended up putting in some 50% nitro. And actually, it was surprising that going from 30% nitro to 50%, it went from barely flying to actually flying pretty good. The engine just smelled awful, though. I don't know if there's any way it would have lasted. I sold it after, I don't know, maybe a dozen flights. It wasn't very fun to fly.
Yeah. The one thing, I tell you what, and I bet he still could, my dad could make a ducted fan engine sing. And I mean, he had the magic touch because his engines were always reliable. Because one of the concerns always was, when is it going to quit? You're going to blow a glow plug or whatever. And rarely did his fans quit when he was flying. It was amazing. And I picked up some of that, but so my first jet was actually one of my dad's Sabre kits. I built it as an FJ Fury. I did that when I was in college, and 7.5 Turbax one fan, and it flew fantastic. I mean, it flew probably $130, $125, and it was, the technology. What really struck me about those days, like especially in the 80s, is because scale competition started in about, I think it was 1980 is when they started the U.S. Scale Masters, and I mean the level of modeling that existed was just incredible. The craftsmanship, and it was the days where if you wanted it, you had to go build it. You couldn't just go buy a pre-built airframe or anything like that. And so, but like guys like Dave Platt, right? My dad, Tom Cook, Bob Violet. I mean, Bob Fry. There were some just amazing guys doing amazing stuff back then. And if they wanted something, if they wanted to do all that detail, they had to physically craft it.
Yes.
They didn't have 3D printers. They didn't have CAD to do this all on. And so it was a whole other time, and it was just really awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, that is something that I will say. I think people that get into the hobby nowadays, and definitely in the last even 5 to 10 years, don't really understand what it used to take to be in the hobby before. Yes, there were ARFs and even some ready-to-fly-ish airplanes in the 90s and 2000s, or the early part of the 2000s. But what they have today, I think they take it for granted. And then even if they have a very minor accident and they maybe dent something or crack something or just barely break something, they throw it away because they have no recollection, no understanding of how to repair, how to model at all, which is okay. I don't hold that against anybody. That's just the way it happened.
Yeah, it's all part of the game.
Yeah, than where you came from, or even where I came from. I built my first kits in the 90s. I was back then building a lot of smaller electric airplanes and also 40 size kits that were mostly laser cut, some die cut, some old Midwest kits in particular. But a lot of those airplanes are relatively refined designs that kind of fell together. You didn't really have to do a whole lot of modeling. You maybe had to carve a block to, fill it out a stab or something like that, but it wasn't a whole lot of work. And so even I didn't get to learn a lot of the skills that guys learned in the 80s, or like my grandfather learned in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where he was, doping things and putting rivets on and sewing in different stitching and all kinds of things in airplanes. But you don't see that kind of stuff anymore.
No, I mean, a lot of it, there still is that level of craftsmanship, but it's done in a different way, right? There's so many more tools available to utilize, like especially with 3D printing. You can, the limitation is really what you can draw in CAD at that point, because you've got these insane detailed printers with the SLA and the liquid resin that can just do incredible stuff. But the other thing is, with the composite technology, they can do all of the surface detail and all the panel lines, and they can make it look like a real wrinkled finish, right? And then they just cut a mold off of it, and they can replicate that all day long. Yeah, and that was relatively new concept back in kind of the early 2000s. I think is when guys were starting to kind of do that sort of stuff. Now there were models with prescribed panel lines and stuff like that, but not with all of that insane detail that's the kits that you see nowadays. It's just phenomenal. You're like, I couldn't even build it that nicely, so.
Yes, it's come a very, very long way. And I think, again, people take it for granted to some degree. You also don't have to learn those skills if you don't want to. And, that's okay. Not everybody does. And again, I personally don't hold it against people, but I do see some of our fellow hobbyists. Sometimes they kind of, they shun people, or they kind of put them down for not having those basic modeling skills. But my argument is, well, hey, if they're interested in learning, teach them. Someone taught you. You didn't just figure it out on your own, more than likely. I mean, there were some things I had to figure out on my own, like how to put CA hinges in, but that was harder than I thought.
And that's the beauty of the hobby, right? Because you can make it as much or as little as you really want it to be, right? If you really want to go all in and you want to do your own design, you have all the tools available to do that. And it's a fantastic way to learn, but not everybody wants to do that. A lot of guys just want to go out and fly and have a good time. And so that's what's so great about it now, right? Is there really is something for everyone. And so, yeah, I think the accessibility is so much more now than it was back then, which is really fantastic.
It is, and I think a part of what's made it more accessible, of course, electric was one step. I think bind and fly was another iteration, and foam airplanes that are injection molded and have a great amount of surface detail, and then also still fly pretty well. And then on top of that, it's technology. So AS3X and Safe Select. So I would like to ask this question. It might be a loaded question, but you've been in the hobby a very long time. I think you're a very skilled pilot. So how do you feel about technologies like AS3X and Safe Select?
That is a loaded question. Do you want my honest opinion?
Yeah, let's take honest opinion.
No, actually, like the Safe, I think is a fantastic tool. And it's a great way for somebody to get into it real easily. The one drawback with it is that it can create a situation where somebody gets dependent on it. Like it changes the airplane from a rate command system to an angle command system.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually commanding, when you want to roll the airplane with Safe on, you're actually commanding a roll angle. You're not actually controlling a roll rate. And so what ends up happening is you'll move the stick all the way to the right if you're making a right turn, and it limits you. But the thing about RC, it's really fine motor movements, right? When you're maneuvering and that kind of stuff. And so it can be negative training if you get into that mode. You're like, okay, I'm going to go all the way to the right, and I'm going to turn in this nice bank. So what I always tell guys is to use it to supplement the training that you're getting from like your local club and stuff like that. And it'll help save you if you get into trouble. But you want to try and set it up such that you can maneuver the airplane more or less like you normally would without Safe on. And you can do that by, if you flip your rates all the way to high rates, what I found in playing with it is that the higher your rates, the higher the bank angle you'll get from the system. And so what you can do is with the higher rates, around center, it'll feel a lot more accurate to flying with Safe off. And so I always recommend guys to approach it that way too. But again, if you get into trouble, it's going to save you. And I know a lot of guys who like to have it in the background just in case they get into trouble, they can turn Safe on. It'll auto level the airplane for them. And I think that's really a great part about it. The whole system as a whole is a great way, like I said, to supplement the training that you're getting.
Sure.
Yeah, I think even Steve probably agrees. The idea with Safe is not that you always fly with it forever and ever and ever, because you will become dependent upon it, and then it's a crutch to a degree. We want you to use it as needed, but the goal is to use it as little as possible so you can get the full-on experience. But hey, there are some guys that need it more often than not, and that's okay. If you're out flying because you have Safe, great. But I think maybe Steve can explain. In our trainers, Steve, we don't just have Safe and then no Safe. We have that kind of intermediate step for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a couple different perspectives on it, but yeah, you're right, Jason. As far as the trainers go, I mean, we've got, first level, second level, and then you move on to your AS3X, right? But you've got varying levels of envelope opening up for the pilot. So you can really kind of go, you can be a off the street, zero skill guy that's interested in aviation and say, I want to fly an RC airplane and be successful. And then you can slowly work your way out of that. I do see your point, and many other, community members say, oh gosh, that stuff, that's going to teach you bad habits. And it certainly can. I'm not, saying that, no, that's wrong. What I have seen though, is it's definitely brought in more folks into the hobby.
Absolutely.
Like for example, like my brother, I'm like, no one in my family ever did RC before I did it. And I finally got my dad into Tamiya semi trucks this summer or this winter, and my brother is starting to fly. He has a UMX turbo timber, and he loves it. And he hates Safe. He can't stand it. He's like, oh, I hate this. I like to fly this standard way. And it's funny to see someone like him who is, I've spent a little time working with him, buddy boxing over the holidays and stuff. But his perspective is a new pilot who never had any RC experience really before, and then absolutely hates it. So you can be anybody. And then someone like me I like to have it there just in case. If a bug flies, I've had it where like a bee that's hit me, you kind of freak out for a second or whatever. or you got to take a phone call, or even the folks that have like physical disabilities that can't hold two sticks at the same time.
Exactly.
It opens up a whole nother window. So yeah, there's pros and cons to every system.
Absolutely. Well, it's you said it right. It's the accessibility, right? And it opens up a whole new world, because I'll be honest, RC can be really intimidating for people. Like, oh my gosh, I can't do that, right? And so it takes away that intimidation. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing in any way, because it's not. Right. But yeah, I just always recommend to people to use it smartly.
Yeah, it's always good to have a solid foundation of true skills to fly. Get a simulator, get someone to help you fly. I mean, all of us learned most likely without a real flight level simulator, right? We learned from going to the club and getting someone to teach us to fly. I know you mentioned you had a simulator, but in reality, it's today's world of sims are a lot different than back in the day. Yes. And then when I first started flying, I kind of I said it last week, I taught myself how to fly on real flight G3.5 when I was working at a hobby town when I was in high school. But I took that knowledge and then was able to go out to the field and fly, obviously without AS3X at the time. So yeah, have a solid foundation, and then use that technology to bolster your flying, which is pretty much what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'd say that I think it's good for people to hear the opinions of people that have been in the hobby a long time. And I like where you come from, because I think you're not one of the I never want anything in any of my planes. I don't want anybody to ever use it. If you're using it, you're never going to learn. I think you see there's value, but I also see that you agree with, I think, a lot of people that have been doing this a long time. Try to get off of it if you can. But use it as a tool if needed. And, May Walker made a good comment. Every skill level can benefit from safe. For that good example that Steve gave of a bug flying in your eye, I've used it for the same reason. We get gnats around every once in a while, and I'm out there just flying, beautiful evening. Next thing I know, there's a swarm of gnats in my face. I turn on safe, put the stick in the corner, and I can hear the plane doing circuits. Well, I'm like, where are these things coming from? And then I walk, 50 feet off to the other side, and the plane's just been doing a circuit the whole time with the stick buried in the corner. And it saved my airplane, because I had that option available. So that's why we have safe select in a lot of our airplanes, higher end models in particular. In the beginner airplanes, we have safe, which is just full on safe. And that's beginner mode, which is pitch and bank angle limits, maybe about 30-degree angle limits. And when you let go of the stick, it goes back to level. Intermediate mode is about 45-degree limits, no self-leveling. And that's kind of like the next step to full control. And so that way, if you let go of the stick, now it just keeps doing what it was doing, just like it would normally. And then obviously experience mode, there's no limitations. And, we want people to learn in beginner mode to start with, to feel comfortable, but immediately get out of that. Even if you take off and land with it, that's one thing. Get up in the air, fly without it, and then, flip into it if you need it. But try to get to experience mode as quickly as you can. And also use a simulator, because you might as well use all the amazing technologies and tools you have to use.
So much available. It's awesome.
So how about then the other part of that, which is AS3X and gyro?
Honestly, I'm not a huge gyro guy. A lot of airplanes really don't need a gyro, but there's definitely benefit to them. It'll make a small model feel bigger. It helps smaller models, especially, to kind of cut through atmospherics and things like that a little bit better. And actually, some airplanes do tend to benefit from them, because they exhibit some pretty quirky characteristics, and it'll help remove some of that and help it to present more realistically, like if it's a scale model. A perfect example is my Jet Hangar A-7. So that airplane has some quirks to it. It's got a nice big anhedral wing. You've got this tall dorsal on the back. And so anhedral wing induces roll instability. And so that airplane, when it's slow and on approach, it likes to wing rock. It'll just waggle if it gets a gust or something like that. And I actually did put an AS3X in that airplane, and I absolutely love it because it did take away a lot of that. And I don't set it up really aggressively. It's very passive the way that I set it up, just some rate damping to help smooth it out. And so, yeah, it really helped that airplane fly even better. And I enjoyed it a whole lot before, but I enjoy it that much more now that it has the gyro in it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed about higher end, larger models in particular, or a jet like that has that strange tendency. It can just improve your experience. You may not need it. You can fly without it, of course. Nobody needs the gyro to fly most airplanes. but it just makes your workload a little less, especially in crosswind, especially in blustery conditions, especially if it has those weird aerodynamic idiosyncrasies already. We tend to put it in everything because the hardware is already there. And then one thing that I do say to a lot of people that argue they don't like it is personal preference. So gains and rates and other things, you can tune all that. We try our best to fine tune them out of the box so they work for most people. But I will say that more experienced and more skilled pilots will have usually a different setting in mind or preference in mind. And the good news is with our latest generation now with the new smart technology, a 637T receiver or TA receiver, you can do forward programming from the transmitter. So you can literally on the fly adjust your gains and everything in the air, unlike before where you had to land, plug it into a Bluetooth module and go on your phone and then load it and go fly again, or hook it up to your PC. And so we're trying to make gyros a little bit easier to use, easier to set up, and that way you can more easily fine tune them. Yeah, so we're working on
the Bluetooth connection on. I only have 2 airplanes that I've actually programmed gyros in, but all of the bind and fly stuff I have. Obviously, they've got the AS3X going.
Yes. So after AS3X and Safe, which are probably the more controversial technologies out there, guys. How about 2.4 gigahertz? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. You don't have to, man. I remember back in the day, you go to an event, you put your radio in impound, you got to get the pin to go fly. And if they don't have the pin, you got to wait till the guy's done flying. And oh man, it's awesome. I love it.
And back then it was terrible because maybe you had to do some just tweaking of your surfaces or something. You couldn't even use your radio at all if somebody had that channel. You couldn't turn it on in the pits. And so we had DSC cords, if you remember that, on some higher end radios where you could plug it in the back of the transmitter into the receiver and you could control it that way without using radio frequency. But yeah, I was at an event in San Diego, if you remember that Midwinter Electrics event they used to have every year. And I had a $3,000 Mikado Logo 20 helicopter. Freaking loved this thing. I waited 6 hours to fly it and then finally got the pin and the guy turned his radio on in the pits. And yeah, it was disgusting how awful the crash was. And that was when we had our very first set of Thunder Power LiPos in there. It luckily didn't catch fire, but like Charlie and I hand built these LiPo batteries a couple nights before. It spent like 6 hours building these, 4P 8,000 milliamp batteries, and those were gone. My Plettenberg motor was gone. My PCM receiver smoked. There was nothing left of that thing. Oh, actually, I take that back. The tail case survived, so that was nice.
See, that happened more often than
I think everybody that flew back there probably had something happen like that. I did.
Yes, and even if it wasn't someone turning on your channel, it was just interference in general.
Interference, yep.
Yeah, especially with electrics. I think in higher power electrics with, in larger airplanes with bigger batteries, and when we added digital servos in the mix, it all just compounded to where 72 was just overwhelmed. It didn't work great in a lot of applications anymore. So, I mean, it still works.
I had pretty good luck with 72 generally. But, I always had that Sabre that I mentioned or that I built as a Fury. I lost that one due to radio.
Oh.
It's like flying along, and I went in a turn and just spiraled into the ground. It's like, what the heck just happened? So
which hurt a lot more when you were building it back then.
Yeah, it hurt a lot.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Yep. So let's see. Those guys are making comments. Yep, another thing.
One of the guys had a good comment about AS3X and the UMX line, right? He said that's what really makes that line work, and he's right. Like, if you were to try and fly one of those models in a kind of windy day without that, you would get blown all over the place. And I can fly those things in any number of wind. I have no concern with doing it, and they handle it like a champ. It's great. It
is impressive. And that's actually, if guys look at our marketing a little more closely, when we market the gyros, that's one thing we say is the idea is to make a plane feel larger than it is. And that's really what it's doing, is it's basically making an airplane that you couldn't fly in 5 or 10 mile per hour winds fly in those, because the gyros are doing the work for you to compensate, as though it's an airplane that's twice its size, 3 times, 4 times its size, whatever it might be. So yeah, gyros are definitely a good thing, but again, personal preference on tuning in particular. And not everybody needs it.
I mean, for the longest time, they weren't allowed in. They only allowed excuse me, they only allowed rudder gyros, and at least that's still the case in the U.S. Scale Masters. But I know at Top Gun, they allow full 3-axis gyros now. So if you're competing at Top Gun and you don't have a gyro in the airplane, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and that's because it's not, if it is blustery in particular, it's probably going to bounce around a little bit. So
it always is at that competition.
Yeah.
It's always crosswind and it's always windy.
Yeah, I can see that. So yeah, that is interesting. That I didn't know the Scale Master still doesn't allow gyros all around.
Pretty sure that's the case. Yeah, at least in the rules. I think that. I mean, I wouldn't have any issues with guys showing up with gyros in their stuff if it's set up passively and all that stuff, you know. So
yeah, what is the reason to leave the gyro out in competition? Is it to make sure the better pilot wins?
I think so. I don't know. It's kind of a holdover that they didn't really have that technology, but I think part of it had to do with like the realism score. They wanted it to be more about the pilot than about the airframe. But as airplanes got bigger airplanes presented better and cut through the atmospherics better. And I don't know. I kind of feel like it shouldn't really even matter at this point anymore.
I kind of agree.
And because everybody's flying with them anyways, I think.
So that said, you mentioned everything's gotten bigger, but you have recently won the Scale Masters with not large airplanes.
That's true. The A7.
And that's like for guys that don't know it, that's like a 90 millimeter sized airplane, right?
Yeah,
but it's
90.
Yeah. So it's a heavier airplane than a lot of foamies guys are used to. So I'm guessing it probably weighs 10, 12 pounds.
More like 14 3/4.
Oh. So it flies more like a real jet probably would.
Like a heavy metal jet, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool. So it probably presents pretty well, even in blustery conditions.
Actually, it does. The airplane, and you'd never guess, it's 100% scale airplane. The design, actually, my dad, back in the 80s, was contracted by LTV to restore a wind tunnel model of the A7. Mm-hmm. And so he asked their permission. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to restore this. Can I cut a mold off of it and make a kit?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So that particular airplane was made from the actual wind tunnel model that they tested full scale.
I can't even wrap my head around how back in the day did they make a wind tunnel model that was accurate. I'm assuming some dude just sat there and whittled this thing down out of a block of metal.
Yeah, I mean, that I'm not even entirely sure. It had to have been, machined by hand, because they were all built from metal. And yeah, it had to be hand cut on the machines. Guys,
so he took this
and all sorts of different measurement devices to ensure the contours. And
they may have been able to make rough cuts with some CNCs, because back then I don't think they had 5-axis CNC machines. They probably got down to the basic overall shape, and then they had to whittle it down from there, like carving a bar of soap.
Yeah, at the time that wind tunnel model would have been made, it would have been in probably the 60s, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe no CNC machine.
Yeah.
So that's a very cool. So your dad took this male mold, so to speak, or this male plug, and he splashed it, or he made a mold out of it. How did he do that?
So the way that to make a composite mold, you have to split the male master in a way that allows you to separate the molds off of it. So he buried it into a parting plane, so that way only half of the fuselage is exposed, and then you lay up, you prep it all, you wax it, PVA it, and then you put gel coat over it, and then you lay up all kinds of tooling glass over that, and then once that's cured, you pull the part out of the parting plane, you keep that mold part on the master, and then you lay up the other side. Now, depending on some of the detail features and the airplane itself, you may want to make additional parting planes depending on how you want to, because if you end up with a negative draft somewhere, you'll never get that thing apart. So that there's those considerations too, and sometimes you have to make additional mold pieces that are removable to be able to get the part out of the mold.
Yeah, it's a cool process.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what are you working on these days? You got anything in the works that you've been using your Corona time for?
I just finished up an Bonanza ARF. I flew that last weekend. That was a fun project. I'm working on a Freewing F14, but after that, I actually want to get onto my next scale project. I've got a big FJ4 Fury that, according to Craig, Ali is jealous about. So that I'm hoping to get built. I just received the fan for it yesterday. It arrived. So I'm going to put a Schubler fan in the thing. And
Nice.
it really, so it's an even 1/6 scale. The airplane's 72 inches square. It's all composite. It's a kit that my friend Dorian designed and has been working on with my dad. And so really would make sense to put a turbine in it, except that I can really only fly turbines around here at my home field, and only when the stars align on the conditions of the day. But I can't fly it anywhere else, like any of the local events that I go to. So I ended up deciding to just go put a real high power 14S electric fan in it. So
For work.
Yeah. 14S. Whew.
Yeah. It's I expect the airplane's probably going to weigh like 26 to 28 pounds when it's done. So it's a big model.
That's
so
cool.
Hopefully I'll be able to get the performance that I'm looking for along with the flight times from that fan system.
Yeah.
So what capacity of battery are you going to carry in that?
Probably an 8,000, maybe even, I might even parallel some 5,000s.
That's 10.
Yeah, to get 10,000. We'll see. I'll start with 8. If I haven't seen 8,000s around in a while, so I don't know if we can still get them. I might have to use, I could always go with the 7,000s that you guys have.
Yes.
So
We do have those, which are a good alternative.
It's going to be pulling like 130 to 140 amps at full throttle. So
that's a lot of wattage, a lot of horsepower.
stand way back when I plug the thing in.
Yeah, be careful when you're plugging it in. So many years ago, we built one of those Hangar 9 46% Ultimates. Do you remember this airplane? The yellow one?
Yes, I think so.
Huge airplane. We converted one of those to electric about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it was using a power system that had 3 sets of batteries in parallel. So I want to say I think it was 10S 3P. And so you plug in one 10S set and another 10S set, and I didn't think about it, but they were Dean's connectors. So the male connector was sticking out, and I'm up under this thing trying to plug it in, and I can't reach it quite right. And so I'm like, I don't know, and I'm just feeling around. I have my wedding ring on, and it touched the male connector that was exposed. Oh, I'll take that back. It was 12S, and my ring just exploded. It was unbelievable. It burned my finger. The connector, it was just like parts of it were missing. It was spectacular. So then I learned my lesson. You got to be very careful with really anything over 10S, which I think is why the FAI has always set their rules for like F3A at 10S. So because 37 volts doesn't do as much harm as 42 plus volts can do with a 12S and 14S setup. So
yeah, I've had the same situation happen. I arced it across my ring. I use the 6mm bullet connectors on the high power stuff, and I wasn't even plugging in something high power. I was just sticking the battery into the airframe, and the 2 connectors ended up touching my ring, and it flared up. I get a big old blister on my finger, and yeah, it was gnarly.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to have to think about, but it is a real risk. I know some of the guys that worked with me at the time were telling me that they worked in the military, and there were certain things they worked on where they had to take all metal off. Yeah. And they couldn't use metal tools because if a tool like a wrench fell across terminals, the whole thing would just explode. So yeah, it's a crazy, crazy thing, voltage and shorts and all these things to think about. So yeah, I love giant electrics though, and I really wish that there were more big EDFs out in the world. I understand it's not practical for a lot of people because of the batteries in particular, the cost, the maintenance. It's still cheaper than a turbine, is my guess, but also not quite the performance of a turbine, not quite the flight time, that kind of thing.
It depends. It really depends. Like my A7, so I've actually had that airplane, I think now 15 years that I've been flying that airplane. And when I first flew it, it had a turbine in it. a golden or not Willis, a MW44 Gold 10-pound thrust turbine, and it flew phenomenally. It was really quite fast. But interestingly enough, when I converted it to electric, and especially the system that's in it now, the performance isn't that much different. I think the turbine had the top end speed a little bit, but the climb performance and the speed in general is actually quite similar. I was very surprised by it. The airplane, you would expect it's kind of this weird shaped kind of draggy airplane, but it's fast. It is a really quick airplane.
It's kind of interesting how that works out. I think in model form, it has a lot to do with ducting, how well the ducting works, and then obviously the efficiency of your fan / turbine.
Yeah,
does seem to matter. Which I think it seems like on the smaller turbines, their efflux velocity is a lot higher maybe than some of the bigger turbines. They're pretty small diameter, the small ones usually.
Yeah,
so it's really fast.
The one that was in there, I think it was like the size of a quarter or something. The compressor opening, it was so
crazy.
Small.
Yeah.
Smaller turbines now. At the time, I think that was about as small as it got, and then now there's even smaller ones.
So you got the P20. Is there anything smaller than that? Calibri, I think, has like a T15 or something.
Yeah, and then Zykoy just released a real nice small turbine too.
That's cool. Small turbines are really awesome. The downside is, and a lot of guys may have noticed this when you're shopping turbines, a little bitty turbine and a mid-sized turbine do not cost that much different.
No, they don't.
So
and in some cases, the smaller one will cost more. It really depends where you're getting it from.
Yes, it's very true. It's very true. So there's I've noticed like a sweet spot in that like 60 to 180 size turbines are kind of like the better bang for the buck, the amount of power you get. But of course, then the airplane is bigger and costs more, and servos cost more, and all these things. So the crazy world stuff. But I love EDF. So what was your very first electric ducted fan? Do you remember?
I do. Well, do you want the first successful electric ducted fan?
No, the first one that failed. I want to know. Yosho T33.
Yeah, I think many people failed on that one.
Yeah, so did I.
No, it was this was late 1990s. I was starting to get into it. Or actually, no, I guess it was early 2000s. After I graduated from college, I started playing with electric ducted fans a little bit to pique my interest. And so I had a flying styro F-16 that I had gotten from Robert Wagner from Electric Jet Factory. I don't know if you remember those guys at all.
Definitely.
And he had a F-16 XL conversion kit for it, like wing kit. And so I put together one of those. And I didn't secure the Elevon servos well enough and didn't really notice it. So we launched the thing off of a bungee. And I'm at my old high school field, and I'm trying to turn the thing left, and it won't turn, and it kind of turns, and then it turns right into a power line pole. Oh. It just smacks it. I was like devastated. I was so pissed. I was like, man, what the heck? So that was it. Kind of flew, and then until it hit that pole, but and then I had a flying styro. HE162. I don't even remember where I got it from. I think I got it from a swap meet or something. And I kind of threw that together and flew it a few times. It flew good, but getting it in the air was really challenging because you have that fan up on top of the wing above the CG, and it wants to nose over when you power the thing up until it's flying. So I ended up kind of pranging that thing off of a bungee too. And then after that, I was like, all right, no hand launch, no bungee launch. I'm going full retracts. And then at the time, I got involved with some guys who were working on an F-14, a twin electric F-14. And so I ended up, my dad and we acquired the rights to that design, and I actually developed the full kit that my dad offers. And so that was my first real successful EDF. Was that F-14, and I flew it for a few years, and I actually competed in some Scale Masters qualifiers with it, and had a lot of fun until, and I was flying it on twin 70 millimeter fans, 600 watts each, which was a lot of power at that time. 3 cells each side. This was right when the lipos were coming online. So the first 2 flights, I flew it on round cells. I had nine cells on each fan, nickel metal hydrides, and I had a fan quit on me, and actually one of the motors I found out later burned up on me. So I didn't realize that I wasn't able to get the airplane back to the field and ended up crashing it on the second flight, but rebuilt the thing. I recrafted the nose from the parts and ended up flying it for a number of years. Had a really good time with it.
It's interesting that you ended up with a relatively complex airplane as your first successful EDF.
Yep.
Hey, Steve, do you remember those flying styro airplanes, or was that before your time?
No, I don't think so. No, because remember, 20 years ago, I got in the hobby on the car side, and then it took me so it's really only been on the air side, like probably 15 or so years. So yeah, I don't really remember that stuff.
I think they were big in the late 90s, early 2000s to the mid 2000s. They were literally like super fragile, hollow sheet foam airplanes. They were beautiful and they were very expensive. And I think they were made in Czechoslovakia, if I'm not mistaken. And Hobby Lobby was a distributor for them for a long time. And they had all kinds of jets and scale stuff. And it was just almost too fragile, though, and too expensive for me to get all of it. I had a couple of them over the years, but they never lasted because you could just pick it up wrong and break it.
And actually, this one, the F-16 was actually when it was EPS foam. It was before they went over to the Depron, that heat formed Depron that they were doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's when they went to the hollow kind of, those designs were unique. And the Depron was actually a really good foam. It's a shame we can't get it anymore because it was it kind of was flexible, but also strong and stiff. And
it's neat building material, the Depron. It's really, really unfortunate you can't get it anymore.
So it's just gone for good, right?
Pretty much. I don't know. From what I understand, there's kind of something similar, but I don't know. I haven't really played with it at all. But yeah, I bought a bunch of Depron, warped Depron because that's all that was left, just so I could have some.
Oh, it's still great material. There's different things you can do with it and shim stuff with it, and it'll hold up, and it doesn't weigh anything, relatively speaking. So yeah, I kind of miss it. So here's a question from the chat. This is a fun one. I'll answer it, but I'll let Chris answer it first.
Let me count. Flyable airplanes, I've probably got about a dozen or so. I've got a stack full of kits. I've got a bunch of racks up above me that have a bunch of kits just waiting to be built. And so I've probably got another dozen or so of unbuilt airplanes. And I actually, my wife thinks I have too many, but as modelers go, my collection isn't that bad. Because I know guys who have like hundreds of airplanes and most of them are flyable. I'm like, man, how do you choose what you're going to fly?
I kind of expected you to say, there's a couple dozen around me, but I got like a whole 2 more rooms in the back and a storage unit with a couple hundred airplanes in it. That's you're right. It's not terribly uncommon, which, for me, I had a disease for a while and I just bought everything. And I've whittled it down over the years. My parents can attest to this, but I still have brand new in the box, probably well over 100 airplanes, mostly old vintage Kyosho ARFs that were kind of near and dear to my heart. Some easy ARFs from back in the day that I thought were cool. Some really obscure stuff like Futaba had some ARFs back in the day, Hirobo airplanes, really weird stuff. Even JR made some ARF airplanes at one point. And then flyable, probably a few dozen, but that's the problem is it's hard to pick what to fly. And you can't take, even with my truck, I can take 5 or 6 airplanes maybe, and it's hard to pick. But I will say some of my favorites are some of ours and our newest airplanes, like the Timber X goes with me all the time. As far as EDFs, that freaking Viper and F-16 70mm are just sweet. That A-10 is going to go into my rotation for sure. The new A-10 64mm. And then what else is a good one? Trying to think. I really like our Cherokee. People make fun of me, but I love that friggin' thing. It looks good. On 4S, it's a rocket ship, and it blows people's minds. But then you throttle back, you put the flaps down, and you fly it around at dusk, and it looks real. Yeah. It's an amazing, amazing airplane. And so, I have some bigger stuff, and I'll admit, as much as I love giant scale turbines and giant scale airplanes, it's just so much work to take them out to the field without a trailer and without being able to leave them out there comfortably. And I stick to the foam stuff, the Park Flyer midsize stuff.
The airplanes that I have to really take apart. I don't fly all that much. If I can put it in my van in one piece, I'll take it all day long.
And that is a deciding factor, I think, for a lot of people, which is one thing we've tried to keep in mind when we make bigger airplanes now. We try to make them come apart as easily as possible with either no tools or almost no fasteners. Now, that's our goal, is to get to, a giant scale foam airplane where the wings pop in, no fasteners. You push a clip, they pop out, and the hands-free servo connections and everything. So that way you could practically carry around a 80 some odd inch model in a sedan.
Yeah,
no problem.
Well, I really like that feature on the P-51 actually, because the thing about it is you can put it in the car on its gear, but you can shorten the wingspan because those outer wing panels come off. So it really makes it really easy to transport in multiple pieces.
So, interesting fact, that Mustang does fly without those wing panels.
That's awesome.
Remarkably well.
What?
It flies remarkably well without them.
That's funny. So
it's pretty shocking.
Flaps up as ailerons, or that's awesome.
Yes, let's just say it's been done successfully a number of times. And
there is a video that I declined us to post publicly, but there is a video.
So
Ali and Pete set up a mechanism to fire the wing panels off in flight, and so there's a video of it flying and it just goes doink because you put air retracts basically in the wings.
Oh yeah,
air piston basically, and just fires off they're dead panels. They're not, ailerons aren't working on them, but it's pretty cool. But I was afraid that we were going to post that and people were going to think that this thing had a problem shooting wing panels off.
Yes, we always have to be careful with what we show. But I wanted to say this because I think some guys may know you have a YouTube channel, which is the RC Geek on YouTube, and you show a lot of things. You show modeling skills that a lot of guys may not have, how to repaint airplanes. You also review some of our models. You show how to put it together. You show your flights with it. You even show sometimes the fine tuning that you do and/or modifications you do after the fact. So, for example, the P-51, that's a good example. You were able to find tires that still look good, not as good maybe as the original tires, but they soften it up a bit. So when you're flying on hard surfaces, it doesn't bounce as much.
Yeah, no, I like we were talking about at the beginning, I come from the old school. And so I want to show some of those old school techniques, but in a new school way. Right. So
yes.
That's what really kind of inspired me to start my website and my YouTube channel, is just to try and, because there are a lot of people that legitimately don't know how to build. And so my goal is to try and show them, because if somebody can show them how, then maybe they'll be inspired to give it a try. And and so I do help a lot of people through email and through my social media pages, and I get regular messages from folks. And there we go.
There's a good comment.
Yeah,
that's fan. Cool. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Rabbit.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really the inspiration for it all, was because I was looking for information. I started out just, hey, what's out there? What kind of information is online? And I found that there was kind of a lot of information lacking. They couldn't really find videos showing how to build airplanes or websites that provided those kind of techniques. They were very few and far between. Now, you do have all of those forums, right? But the difficulty with the forums is that you kind of have to weed through comments to get to some of that really meaningful content that you're looking for. And so my goal was to kind of create a one-stop shop, if you will. And so, I love scale. I love scale competition. And so a lot of my focus is, of course, on scale models. And I'm really hoping to start showing some of the competition builds again when I start getting in on that Fury project. And so, my hope is to inspire people to do something out of the ordinary, right? That they wouldn't normally do. And so I've seen a lot of really positive feedback from folks, and it's been really, really awesome to see that guys are really getting that inspiration to give a repaint a try. And if they have questions, they'll ping me, and I'm more than happy to help folks out to work through any issues, and so it's been fun.
Yeah.
Hey, baby wings.
It's so great to see that kind of feedback from the audience. And then one of the questions I did want to make sure we asked you was, how can people support you in what you're doing so you can continue doing it? Whether it's, subscribe to your channel, or you have gear for sale, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So just watching the videos, subscribing, that supports me. I do have a very small limited product line that I do sell that does help support what I'm doing. And I actually make a whole selection of these simulated afterburner lights, and I put them on a number of the E-flite airplanes, and that really supports anything that comes in, goes directly back into the channel, trying to grow content and create more content, and so that really helps me out. I also have there's a selection of the afterburners, which are called center burners. I've got quite a few options there. And then there's a relatively new product that I created with a friend of mine called a random servo motion generator. If you want to make you never would think that you'd want to move a servo randomly.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to make a cockpit. And
okay. Just the dude moving around in there. Yeah.
Actually, I can show you. I have to find a battery, but so you can make pilot heads moving. I also have used it for moving turrets in a bomber.
That's cool.
Actually,
yeah. When you first say it, it's like, why would you want that unless you were playing the trick on your buddy and you put it on all of his control surfaces?
That'd be fun at RC after dark. That'd be perfect.
Give me a second here.
That is cool. Very cool. So again, guys, like he said, the number one thing you can do is subscribe to his channel, and also make sure that you mash the bell so you get alerts when he posts new videos. And that's the RC Geek on YouTube.
So there we go. Let's see. Can you see them moving? They're not moving a lot yet. There we go. Yeah.
Nice.
That's a nice little touch.
Yeah. So I've got two servos, obviously, or one servo in each pilot. And so the board, which is on the bottom right here, it has two outputs, so you can operate two servos independently, and you can adjust the speed, you can adjust the endpoints, and you can adjust the how often they move.
Yes.
And, yeah,
that's cool. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense now that you show it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's those are the main ways. Just kind of subscribing and follow along is a big help.
How often have you decided to like put out content, or is it just kind of when it hits you, or is it kind of a weekly deal? Or
I post a new video every Tuesday,
right.
And lately I've been doubling up. I've been doing flight videos on Fridays. We haven't, like, all of our events have been canceled because of COVID-19, and I really enjoy videoing other people's models when I'm at events and stuff. So I'll continue the flight videos as long as I have videos to provide. But since I haven't been able to go to any events, I may not have too many for in a few months. But and then and then I what was I going to say? The Geek is awesome. David, you keep talking.
Yeah.
So it may get to a point where maybe I'll post something while there may come a time where there's a lull between videos, depending on if I have content or not. But right now I've got stuff stacked up, so I'll keep posting every Tuesday for as long as I can. And the goal is to always post every Tuesday, and so far I've been able to make that happen. So
yeah, and on our end, to help support that, we're going to keep sending you new stuff. I know Night Timber X, hopefully you'll have your hands on that here shortly, and you can get some videos out there for guys. And I don't think you're necessarily a big 3D guy, right?
I'm a terrible 3D pilot.
But I think you're going to enjoy this airplane because, and the truth is, I think the vast majority of people that buy that are not 3D pilots, but they like the way that it flies. It flies STOL. It can do 3D if you want. You can hover if you want, which hovering is actually not as hard as some of the other 3D maneuvers. But yeah, it's just a fun airplane. Plus, you can fly it at night, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've never actually had a night flyer, so that'll be fun.
You got to try it. I can't believe you've gone all these years without trying it.
Yeah, well, my primary field is actually on a military base, and so access is really limited. And flying at night out there is probably not very likely, but it's something I can bring to an event and fly it after hours at an event and stuff when that time comes. So
exactly,
to go.
But even still, just outside of that, if you don't fly it at night, it's just a great flying airplane. I think a lot of guys enjoy it. A lot of guys like the original Timbrex, and this just makes it even cooler. Plus, we added Smart to it, so you've got all that telemetry information now, which is a nice step up as well.
Yeah.
So I think you'll enjoy that one. And then, there's some other stuff coming down the pike that you kind of know about. And, there's some stuff that I think will really personally interest you a little bit later in the year. I'll have to get you.
Sounds good to me. What is it?
Oh yeah, I wish I could say. I will say that it's not an ultra micro Timbrex because I see even in the early part of our comments here that's everybody keeps saying that. What's this? What's that? Oh, is that a picture?
No. It was the list of all the products. No,
the list of all the yeah. There's that. We got a lot coming.
I think the guys really want to know the hard hitting questions. Things like not so much what's coming next, but who you think would win in a fight, a Jawa or an Ewok?
That's a good question. I guess I would say, I don't know, Ewoks, they seem like they don't give up, right? So I got to give it to them, right?
They're crafty, right?
Yeah, they're crafty, and I don't think they give up. Like they're a little bit, their arms aren't very big, right? And their legs aren't very big, so they're not very mobile or anything. They're just kind of like, oh.
Hey, you never know when you might get a log to the side of the head from one of them.
It's true. Exactly. It can sneak up on you out of nowhere when you're riding by on a speeder bike or something. You never know. So that's cool. I see people saying here, Ewok. Yeah, a couple Ewoks in here. Yeah, that's a good question. So, well, that leads us maybe to some other things here. So outside of the hobby, what do you like to do for fun?
I spend a lot of time. When I'm not in the shop, I'm spending the time with the family. So my daughter plays travel ice hockey. And so we've done a lot of traveling the last couple of years, literally all over the country, playing at various different tournaments. So that's taken up quite a bit of time the last couple of years. Things have changed quite a bit based on the COVID-19 situation. So I don't know if she's going to end up playing this year. Because of all of what's been happening. But I like to play the guitar. I play the guitar. My son's been learning how to play the guitar. And so that's been fun playing with him. And he's showing me up real fast, which is very disconcerting to me.
That's how youngins do it, That's how it goes.
Well, he started out younger. So he's 13 now. I started playing guitar at about, I think 16, 17, something like that. Mm-hmm. So he's starting out younger. So he'll have more years on me.
Yeah, that is the interesting thing about kiddos. They can always pick things up faster than their dads can.
Oh yeah.
I did that when I was learning to fly with my dad. I was 10 and he was in his 30s, and it was a big difference in the progression, we'll say. Also, I had no fear. I'm like, hey, my money. It's your money.
I think that's a lot of
It's funny. I tried to get him to fly with me. He came out with me the last weekend, and I have that the EC 1500. I was training him on, and for some reason he was afraid to crash. I was like, dude, just be fearless, man. I'm right here. Don't even worry about it. He's like, no, it just doesn't feel right. I don't know. So
I get that. Well, maybe you know what? I'll tell you what. We're gonna send him an airplane. How about if we do that? It'll be his airplane that he can learn to fly, and then if anything happens to it, it's not one of yours, so he hopefully won't be as worried.
I think that'd be awesome.
We should do that. We'll send you one of our good trainers that I think you'll have a good time with. An airplane I think you'll also have a good time with. So we'll have to pick carefully. We got a couple to choose.
Like a plan.
Awesome.
Steve's got a visitor. It's like, pay attention to me.
Hey, I've been waiting here for an hour. What are you doing?
Yeah, he wants to go outside for another break. Oh, and then real quick before I forget, I want to plug that for those that have been also watching our Real Flight live streams, Chris is going to join us later on Real Flight. He's going to show us some of his mad flying skills.
Oh boy, I'm going to get showed up, I think. So it's going to happen.
There'll be a couple of us on there. Steve, hopefully, be on there. Myself, Dustin, maybe some other guys can join us. So hopefully we can keep him around for a little while on that. But, at the same time, I know we're going to be here till maybe almost 5 o'clock. That's going to happen at 5 o'clock Central. Oh, I keep forgetting we're Central. So we like to reference Eastern time. So we'll go to about 6 o'clock Eastern on this, and then we'll start that live stream for maybe about 45 minutes or so, give or take. And then, I see this. This is actually what I was thinking. Somebody made this comment here. Aero Scout to the son of Geek. And I've seen, by the way, I've noticed quite a few of you guys have said you've learned to fly in an Aero Scout. And, the Aero Scout is quite possibly one of the least attractive airplanes in the world, but it is one of the best flying airplanes in the world. I think I've mentioned this a few times. The first time I saw it, I was like, come on, man. Don't make me market that. No, I can't. You can't put lipstick on a pig. I mean, you can. It doesn't help.
Sometimes functional, it just isn't good looking.
I remember one day James Haley comes in the office. It's freaking snowing outside, like sideways. He's like, "You got to go fly this thing, man." I'm like, "Come on, give it to me. Smoke it in." And I went outside and flew it. I was like, "What? This thing is amazing. We have got to sell this thing. It's fantastic." So yeah, and then now the rest is history. It's quickly becoming one of our best-selling trainers. I love seeing people saying I'm succeeding with it. Again, not much to look at, but man, it is a hoot to fly. And that's why I think you really enjoy that one too, Chris. It is a blast.
That's good to know, actually, because I get guys asking about trainers, and honestly, I haven't looked into trainers in forever. So knowing what is a good one that I can recommend to folks is good to know.
Yeah, the Aero Scout is nice because it can fly in a lot of places.
Yeah. It's easy to transport. It's extremely agile for aerobatics, knife edge, all that stuff. It's quite a lot of fun. You make yourself comfortable.
It's funny.
So there's Aero Scout, and then the other all-time favorite, especially for guys that fly at a club field, is the Apprentice. And I think we're on the third iteration of the Apprentice. So we had the original Apprentice, we had the Apprentice S where we added safe, and now we have the Apprentice STS where we've added smart to it as well. And that thing is just a freaking great flying airplane. It's a pussycat. It feels good all the time, even in windy conditions because it's kind of big. That's the other nice thing about it. But that said, I'd give the Aero Scout a nod almost all around because you can fly it in a park-like space, maybe a soccer field once you're skilled enough, versus the Apprentice does take a little more room. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've heard of the Apprentice, but I hadn't actually heard of the Aero Scout. So,
well, we might, if you're interested. I mean, it sounds like with your son, especially having some interest, but maybe also being nervous. I think these are great ways for maybe him to get over that initial fear that he's got, and then also I think it'd be a good experience for you to see how safe we call safe. For the trainers, just safe, and then on other airplanes, safe select. And the reason we do that is full-on safe is beginner mode, intermediate mode, expert mode. Yeah. And that is different than safe select. Safe select is basically like beginner mode, and so a little bit tweaked on that. But I think it'll be a good experience for both of you guys to try out both, maybe the Aero Scout and the Apprentice. Apprentice is still a phenomenal flying airplane, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Oh, what's this? Chip Mitchell. If you could only have 2 planes from E-Flight, I wonder if he's asking your opinion.
I don't know. Who is he asking?
I'll say you answer it, and then I'll have Steve answer it.
All right. Well, I actually really, really like the F-18. Unfortunately, I crashed it, so I got too confident with it, and I flipped it over on a landing. I got it too slow, and the nose likes to drift on that airplane if you get it too slow. Yes. And I was like, no, I'm going to land it, dang it. And I tried to force it on the ground and it flipped over. So I really, really like the F-18. That would be one. And actually, the F-16, the 70 millimeter F-16 is an absolute blast. Oh my gosh, that airplane is so much fun.
It really is. It's a great combination of power to weight to flight time to high alpha capability, so slow flight capability. And then also the speed is And it just looks good. I love Thunderbird's F-16s. I think they always look great, but that is an absolute hoot. So F-16 70 millimeter, F-18 80 millimeter, both I think great choices. How about you, Steve?
I'd go with the timber or whatever. Pick a timber, doesn't matter. Probably timber. Turbo timber, just to have a float plane.
Yes.
And then, I don't know. I think the A10 might be up there just based on how I don't own one, but the few times I've flown it, it's pretty spectacular. But the F-16 is just such a fun airplane with high alpha and everything else. So it'd be a toss up between those two. I think I'd have to lean to the F-16 Thunderbirds. It's just that thing is. We've had so much fun flying as a group at like RC Fest or various stuff. Just going to Eli Field and James and Allie and Dustin, we're all flying them in high alpha together. It's just there's nothing else more fun than that. But yeah, on the E-flite side, I think those would be my two picks for sure.
Yeah, that A10 is incredible. That airplane is so much fun. The performance on it, the flight times, it's just I've had so much fun with that airplane.
Yeah, I think that A10 is going to go into my lineup for sure.
Yeah. Well, when I first got the sticks on that, we were doing the early test early test samples, and David Payne was like, "Here, fly this," and which happens often with stuff. And I remember hearing like James would say, "Oh man, you got to fly it. It's really fast. It's it's super agile." And then I got out there, I was like, "Yeah, this thing lived up to all the hype." And this was prior to it being kind of finalized. But so they were still working on the code and whatnot. But I was like, man, guys, this is way better than any other A10 I've ever flown, and any electric, smaller or bigger A10 out there. It's just incredible. So if you've not gotten into the A10 game and you're interested in a small plane that is just straight line 100-mile-an-hour speeds and just awesome rocket ship and on rails, that's the airplane.
What's interesting about it is it feels much bigger than it is when you fly it, which I was really struck by. It's a small model. It's not that big, but man, it feels a whole lot bigger in the air when you just the way that it responds and the way that it flies. So
yeah, I think a part of that is the planform inherently, the A10 planform with the amount of power that's there. I think it's just working well. And I think AS3X is adding to that.
Oh, sure.
It would be interesting to fly both ways, with it and without. And some guys, they insist that airplanes don't feel any different without. But I bet that one would feel a little bit different if you didn't have AS3X.
Yeah. It really depends on how you set up AS3X, whether it feels different or not without it. Right.
Right. Very true. Very true. So here's Barry Boozier, Wes. He says F-16 70 millimeter is best flying jet right now for the price and size. And I kind of agree. If a guy has the skills to fly that airplane, the whole envelope of what it's capable of, the high alpha to the high speed, you just can't beat it. There's no jet that gives that type of experience. But I will say, if I only had two jets to take out to the field all the time myself, it would be the Viper and the F-16 together, because the Viper is just a sweet flying ride. Everything about it is great. But what I like is F-16, the Viper, and the A-10 now all use the same battery. So I could take all three of those to the field with all the same batteries, and that's kind of nice. Not having to manage a bunch of different sizes of batteries and so on and so forth, and being able to share them. For what it's worth, that's when we come out with new models, we're always looking at that. Like, what's a battery that guys already have? Let's stick to that, 3-cell, 4-cell, 2200 to 3200, maybe that 6S 3200 to 4000 in the midsize, and then 6 5,000 on the higher end. We're looking at that.
Yeah. You mentioned the Viper and the F-16, both very unique jet flying experiences, right? I mean, they're totally two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
It's really, very interesting. The Viper, such a nice flying airplane, but it's one that's like flies really nicely on the wing. You can slow it down real nice, and it just glides beautifully. And the way that I describe the F-16, it's a fun brute force kind of EDF jet, right? It just flies kind of like a brute force F-16 should, It's
very hard to describe the way F-16s fly to people. They're oddly draggy, but oddly not. Yeah. It's an interesting feeling when you go into a turn and you pull, you can kind of watch it skid.
Yeah, that's
and it's a combination of the plan form and the drag and all that. It's just got this really weird and then they really slow down and you're like, whoa, crap. And then next thing you know, you level off and that thing's a rocket ship again.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a neat airplane. I love watching them in the real world flying, especially when they do the one-off demos at, Air Force events and whatnot. It's the high alpha stuff and then the fast ripping by. It's pretty spectacular stuff. And the way it rolls, I just like the way it rolls. Maybe because it's got the short wing, it's just on a roll. It's pretty impressive the way it rolls. So I love that airplane. F-16 Thunderbird is my favorite. Flies like a train. There we go. F-16 Thunderbird. It flies like a trainer and a trainer at 100 mile per hour. It just goes where you point it. It's true.
Yeah, true.
I don't think it's hard to fly an F-16. I will just say it's different. And I've noticed that where people struggle is on landing.
Yep.
And it's not that it's hard to land. It's just different to land. You can high alpha if you want, which you don't have to do. You can fly it down like a normal plane and just flare and roll out. It'll roll a long way. But that's it. It just kind of can bite people, especially if they're just getting into that high alpha stuff. I almost recommend learning that high alpha feel on a plane like a Timber X before you go into the F-16. Because the F-16, if you get behind it high alpha, you're just done. The Timber, you can punch it and go. But the F-16, if you run at airspeed, it's an EDF. So even if you gun it, it's not going to punch out usually.
Well, the important thing to realize is if you're in that situation, to gun it but put the nose down. You're not going to be able to climb straight out of it. You got to get the nose down, build up your airspeed, and then you'll be able to climb out of it.
Here's a good question. Can I use 2 Apprentice batteries in series in one of those jets? And yes, that you definitely can. In fact, I think we talked about that when we released the Viper. You could take 2 of the 3-cell 3200s, that's what the Apprentice comes with, and put them in series as a 6S 3200, and that's perfect. That's exactly what that airplane was designed for. So you just would want to charge the batteries probably independently and then use a series Y harness, which we actually do pre-make Y harnesses for that reason. They're like $10 or something like that. And I know some guys get all hung up on adapter leads and Y harnesses. If it's good quality connectors and good solder joints, there's very little power loss. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. I've done that myself, actually, for what it's worth.
I like the XB70 there on the picture you had.
Yeah. That's a cool airplane.
Yeah.
In the real world. I wish I did, I don't probably expect it to fly well as a model per se, but it sure does look freaking cool. I bet it's like SR-71. May not fly awesome, but man, it sure looks cool. I love it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize it's really hard to get SR-71 to fly well as a model. I mean, you have the configuration is just not very user-friendly in a model format. You have to make it extremely statically stable. And even so, you can run into issues if you don't get it right.
Have you tried? Have you done an SR-71 model?
No, but I've seen a number fly. And actually, I filmed Lance Campbell's SR-71 back at Top Gun a couple years ago. And that thing was amazing. It was an amazing model. And
it's huge. For those that haven't seen it, you should definitely look up his video.
Yeah, the video that I posted on my channel is over 3 million views now. I can't even believe it.
That's cool. That's cool. Hey, it went viral.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll say this: if there was like an EDF SR-71 that was flyable, would you buy it?
I probably would.
How about the guys in the chat? Would you guys buy it? I'm wondering. Let's see. SR-71. That's the question.
It would be. It's got to, you got to get it primed though. It's got to be. No, would for sure. You're gonna get.
I do wonder though if the only downside is it'd be black, right? So got to not leave it out in the sun, guys.
Now you could make it an A12, so it's
so it's silver or gray,
silver and black.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's just not as sexy if it's not all black with the red lines on it.
Maybe.
Yeah. Oh, yep. No. I can't believe Pilot Jerry. No. All right, fair enough.
I know I'd buy one. That'd be sweet. Especially
I would definitely buy it. In a heartbeat. Yeah, there you go, Wes. Yeah. That was an unfortunate thing. Okay, well, so Chris, if you had a dream airplane that you could buy in the market today, I guess let's assume it's a kit or an ARF or whatever you could buy. What is something you would absolutely want to own if you could?
you know, if I had to name my top three, at the very top of that list is probably the F-14 Tomcat is one of my all-time favorites. And I actually have a 1/10 scale fiberglass kit that I need to build these days. So that the F-14 is always at the top of that list. So when I think about what's maybe not on the market, it's hard to say. You know what? Honestly, I would love to see a really nicely done like Mirage 3. You don't see those anywhere other than my dad's.
Yeah.
Kit. Yeah, I love Deltas. I don't know what it is. So anything Delta, I'd be game. I get Eurofighter. I don't like Eurofighters that much.
You don't like a Eurofighter? Yeah, I don't love the looks of the Eurofighter.
Those mustache canards just don't do it.
I get it. Yeah, they do cool things though, but yeah, they're not the sexiest looking beasts in the world.
Nah, too boxy for me.
Yeah, I like the looks of this Rafaldo. That's a good one.
Really nice. I mean, it's French. I mean, you know,
it's sexy, right? Oh, it's sexy. We made it smooth.
Nice and
curvy. Yeah. It's a good looking airplane. I've seen one in person and I was like, dang, actually there's some lines there you don't really see normally if you don't look at it that closely. And there's a lot of swoopiness to it and everything kind of blends together. And I think in the world today, if I'm not mistaken, it's still considered like a Gen 4.5 fighter. It's not Gen 5, but it's kind of like it's better than a 4, but not. I mean, I don't think it'll ever be a 5. But there's still governments buying them. Shocking.
Yeah. Last summer we were we took a trip to Paris and we were there on Bastille Day. So I got to see the whole gamut of the French Air Force fly. Doing flybys as a part of their parade. It was awesome.
That's cool. You know, when I was a kid, and I can't remember what year this is. I'm guessing it must have been in the 80s. I remember I heard something very loud outside. I'm like, what the heck is that sound? And I look up, and it was the Concorde. It comes over my freaking house, and I guess it landed. I lived in Las Vegas at the time. Landed at McCarran Airport. It's the only time it ever flew into Las Vegas, as far as I know. And the sound it made, the smoke trails, it smelled awful. I can definitely see why that thing didn't stick around here too terribly long. But man, the French love that thing.
Sonic travel's expensive.
Oh yeah,
of the shock or the sonic boom that you get. You can't fly it really anywhere. You got to fly specific routes so nobody hears it.
Right, like New York to London.
Yeah, that was pretty much the only route, right?
Yeah, I could see now flying it from, I don't know, San Francisco and LA to China or some of the other Asian routes. I think I still see the likelihood it'll happen in the next 20 to 30 years. I hope, at least, because it sure would beat having to sit on an airplane for 13 friggin' hours.
Well, one of the things that they've been exploring is sonic boom suppression and stuff like that. If they could ever figure that out, then it will make supersonic travel much more of a reality. Well, so speaking of, that is what you do for your day job, right? Yeah, on the slow speed spectrum, but yes. Okay. I work for a defense contractor here in San Diego, working on UAVs.
Ah, very cool. Anything that you can talk about that we would know? Model
Yeah, I'm pretty close hold with kind of where I work, just based on my online persona. Or
totally understand.
Yeah. But yes, you would know the product if I mentioned it.
Very cool. So let's see. So hey guys, I think now if you guys have any questions, if you guys want to put them in the chat, I think now would be a great time to maybe get some of your specific one-off questions answered here.
Ask away.
Yeah.
Let's see what comes up.
I'm gonna step away for a second and walk this dog. He's very
can't wait. That's awesome.
I'll be right back.
Yes, and over the years, in our industry, a lot of guys have gone from being modelers to somehow working. Maybe not. They didn't get an aerospace engineering degree, so they can't go and work on the design for these defense contractors, but some of the guys that I've flown with over the years have become pilots or test pilots for, and turn their hobby into a job, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I bet you put some of your work stuff into your hobby stuff too, right?
Absolutely. I have two competing sides of myself because, I went to school, graduated with an aerospace engineering degree, working as an aerospace engineer, and actually I manage an aerodynamics group at the company that I work at, and so I think we're at about 23 guys that report to me, and so it's been a really fun place to be, and we're doing a lot of really cool stuff. But I say the two competing sides because you go through school and you get all this theory and all of that packed in, but at the same time, I have this practical side that I've acquired through model aviation.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for me, building scale models using the exact airfoils and lofting sections on the fuselage and all that stuff. In theory, using the full scale airfoils in miniature really should not work that well, but in practicality, it works fantastically.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say it's like this really shouldn't work as well as it does, but man, this works great. It's just kind of funny how that is. But the other thing about it too is like the composites experience that I've gotten through the actual building part of it. I leverage that as well in what we do, and so yeah, the hobby as a whole it really is what inspired me to go the direction that I did. Right, I've always loved aviation. I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's what I was going to do. There was no question. I was 4 years old. I'm going to fly fighters. And then in junior high, I ended up having to get corrective contact lenses. So I could no longer meet the eyesight requirement. So at that point, I decided, all right, if I can't fly fighters, I'll design them instead. And of course, that's a bit naive to think, but that was kind of that was the decision process. And so I followed that dream and made it a reality. And it's been a fun journey. So
that's cool to hear, because I had a similar situation. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's all I wanted to be for many, many years. And then when my eyes went bad, they're like, sorry, dude, we take the best of the best. And that means best eyesight too. So I don't know it's that way as much anymore. I think you can go in with LASIK. Back then they didn't accept it.
Right.
And so, and I'm like, well, I'm not going into the Air Force if I can't fly the friggin' airplane.
Yep.
So didn't do it, and not fly models. And it is funny that you brought up those two sides. And I think, in my experience, a lot of guys who become aerospace engineers, when they see what we do, a lot of times they're just like, I don't get it. I don't see how that stuff works. And then when you tell them you designed an airplane and the thing flies, they're like, what? What airfoil did you use? And they're like, I don't know. I just traced this thing and it kind of worked. And it flies like this. And they're like, wow, that's so crazy. And then they try to give you some hints and tips, and you're like, dude, that ain't going to work. I'm telling you, that's not. I've got
the airplane. You're like, look, it worked great.
or it might. Yes, that's true. That's true. It could, exactly. So it can go both ways. That's the very interesting thing.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're designing an airplane, like a model for performance, you probably don't want to use a full scale airplane. Like if you're doing a scale type airplane. But if I was to design a sport model, I wouldn't use a NACA, something or other. There's a whole selection of low Reynolds number airfoils that are absolutely fantastic. That'll get you extreme performance and great drag and lift characteristics in the Reynolds number regime that we're talking about on these models. But
yeah, and airfoil does make a difference. A good example, I don't know if you've ever flown any of our Valiant airplanes, but and I don't recall the airfoil that's on that. Maybe if Craig's watching, he can chime in with the airfoil that he used. But that's a great example of an airplane where I think the airfoil makes a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
It just doesn't require a lot of power to fly well. It maintains energy incredibly well. It glides like no other airplane in its class, and I think it's because of the airfoil in particular. Works incredibly well. So I don't know if he's still on here. He may not be. So I'd love to get your thoughts on whatever airfoil he used. So hey, Craig, if you're hearing us, whatever airfoil you used, unless you don't want to say. If you don't want to say, maybe you can text it.
Hotliner airfoil.
It'll be interesting. Hotliner airfoil. Oh,
yeah. Gypsy salami.
Maybe. Oh, here's one question that I did see came up, which I know a lot of people have this kind of interest in. Like, how do we pick an airplane, and why do certain airplanes do poorly, and what made them perform poorly? And it very much depends on the kind of the balance of everything. You can take an airplane, let's say a P-51 is a good example, make it in almost every size, and they usually sell pretty well. But what we've seen is, for example, a UMX version doesn't sell as well as it used to because it doesn't have retracts, it doesn't have flaps. Those things have kind of become almost expected on any Warbird model. And then in practicality, you can't put those features on even a sub 1 meter airplane. If you have it on a sub 1 meter airplane, it's too heavy usually. And then also the cost goes up. So now you got a 1 meter airplane that's $250. Nobody wants that. So you scale it up to a 1.2, and now you've got the right balance of a good size, good performance. You've got retracts, you've got flaps, you've got your good surface detail. And that's what kind of people expect. And so in that case, the ultra micro model just kind of went away because the world didn't really want it anymore. Now, if we could add retracts and flaps to an ultra micro, would people buy it? Probably. But
if you guys could engineer retracts at the UMX level, man, you guys would be my heroes.
Yeah,
I would love to see that. That'd be so awesome.
We would just have to retire after that because it would be spectacular. We have tried things and they kind of work. The issue really is that we have to consider, again, that balance. What is the right weight for the airplane, the right size of the airplane? One of the complaints we get now is that our ultra micros are getting kind of big. So the citation longitude, which you've flown, is we call it ultra micro, and I kind of get how some people are like, that's not an ultra micro. It's big enough now that you have to go to, it's micro, maybe I'd say. Yeah. That kind of airplane would probably carry retracts and maybe even flaps, but it would then be heavier, so it would land faster. It would take more power to fly, meaning you get less flight time, even if you throttled back. And then also on top of that is just the durability. A little retract, it's not going to be a very durable thing. Guys are blowing retracts out of 1.2 meter and 1.5 meter airplanes and 90 millimeter EDFs all the time. The same would happen in ultra micro, probably even worse if you wanted it to be lightweight and small enough to fit in the model without sticking out. So,
no, there's always that balance, right? For me, the scale guy, I don't care. I'll take it as heavy.
You want it all?
Yeah, I want it all.
That's why you got a 14-pound 90 millimeter airplane.
Cracks and flaps, I don't care.
Yeah, and I get that. And I will say I kind of agree with that, but I also see the flip side of it. When I watch people try to fly some of our heavier models, they really struggle to land them well. What's a good example? I'm going to try and think of something that guys have struggled with over the years. Shoot, trying to think. Well, even like that F-18.
I was going to say, I think F-18 is a good example.
It's probably our hardest to land airplane in a long time. And it's not necessarily bad, but and I think it actually handles the way F-18s always handle. And that's not uncommon, but it is unusual. And it also is kind of heavy. If that airplane didn't have flaps and didn't have retracts and was that size, it would be a lot easier to land, I think.
Yeah, because the thing about it is that airplane does need a little bit of airspeed on the approach to have a good landing. If you get it too slow, it will let you know, which I found out. And so, but the way that airplane flies and maneuvers, man, it just looks like the real F-18 and it feels like the real F-18. I mean, it's such a cool model.
And the sound, that I think is our best sounding airplane. It sounds, I guess real is what I'd say, or more like real. It's got this cool, like,
it's got more whooshiness to it.
Yeah.
I think it's the installation, right? Because you got the spar going through there and kind of
all
small
dirty
mistakes and the extra air coming in. So yeah, that all adds to the acoustics.
Yes, I call it the dirty whoosh. Other airplanes whooshy sounding, but that one sounds just not efficient because of the power and other things getting in the way. And it's that bifurcated, exhaust. It's just not efficient at all. But man, it sure sounds great. And it actually, I think it performs pretty well. It's not our fastest airplane in the 80 millimeter class, but it's over 100. So, you know, it keeps.
No, but the performance is still, you know, the performance is good, and it performs in a scale manner, right? That's what I see in it. Hey, thank you, Pilot Jerry.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So yeah, again, guys, if you haven't been to Chris's channel, make sure you go there. It's the RC Geek on YouTube. And that channel has everything from videos of other people's airplanes, like that awesome big SR-71. That's a cool video to watch. And then you have videos that show modeling, painting, 3D printing, and then reviews of our models and other people's models in particular. And, you know, I did see your Bonanza. That thing is cool. V-tail Bonanza.
Yeah.
I dig
really
it.
Fun airplane.
They used to call that like the Dr. Killer.
Yeah. It's interesting that airplane will kind of wiggle like the real one does.
So see, there's where a gyro would actually maybe benefit, right?
Actually, I did put an AS3X in it. I've been playing with a CG on it, so moving the CG forward did help kind of reduce some of that. But that's just the nature of that design, the way that detail is, right? It's a characteristic of the airplane. So hey, he's back.
Hey, what's up?
So I have the gyro more or less tuned in it, and it responds really, really nicely to the gyro.
So are you using the gyro on all three axis then, or just elevated rudder?
No, all three.
Okay. And so that has
a react receiver in there.
Rudder vaders on that, right?
Yep. Yeah. So combination rudder and elevator. Make sure they all go the right way.
I remember back in the day when I was setting up my first flying wing. It was a Zaggy. You remember Zaggies?
Oh yeah, I do.
That was all the rage in the late 90s, right? That was when electric barely worked, but these stupid things worked, and but yeah, I'm trying to program the elevons, and I'm like, I can't get up elevator and down elevator right, and left aileron and right aileron right, no matter what I do. And I remember I actually called Horizon Hobby, and the guy was like, all you got to do is flip your servos in the channels they're in and reverse everything you just did. And I'm like, oh, really? And then it all worked. I was like, oh, shoot. You have to have them in the way the controls are all going. It's somewhat, you know, the lead off channel or whatever. Anyway, over the years, I think we've tweaked it to where now you can do all that in the radio. So you don't have to always change your servos around, but it was quite a learning experience. And I did see a lot of guys get it wrong, and they didn't realize it. They're not even paying attention. It's like, guys, how do you not know? And they throw it and it rolls or it flips. And that was the end of it. So those were the days, man. Those were the
back in the day, my dad, he used to make sliding trays
for elevon mixing?
For elevons and rudder vaders. I actually have one of the models. So back in high school, we did I was involved in a program where we did it was an aircraft design competition. And so the airplane that we designed was designed for the difference in high speed and low speed. So we designed an airplane with a pylon racer airfoil on it that had a V-tail. And I actually have the airplane hanging up here, but it's got a sliding tray for the rudder vader. So you hook up the rudder servo in the tray, and then the elevator servo pushes the tray back and forth for elevator.
It's pulling the rudder servo, which is ultimately pulling the elevators up. And then if the rudder servo moves, it moves them both at the same time. Yeah, I had an airplane that was that way. What the heck was that? Maybe it was a pilot airplane. And I remember looking in there going, why did this guy do this? But it was because back in the 80s in particular, you didn't have computer radios. Computer radios didn't show up in the 90s. Yeah. And so mixing was mechanical, not electronic. Now it's all electronic, and we take it for granted.
Yeah.
That's a crazy thing. Look at this. Yep, Aptera 1.1. The wings pop off. Yeah, that's a cool thing about the Aptera. I don't know if anybody else has one of those, but when you hit hard, it just all snaps together and it just pops apart.
It just pops apart.
Yeah, those were the days. Oh, look at this. Yeah, there's a model. I don't know that we could get that to work terribly well.
Yeah. You know, it's fun. The people that I've had contact me through like my website and stuff. So you know, Hoot Gibson, right? Astronaut extraordinaire, avid modeler. So he sent me an email. He actually sent me one recently, but a while back, he had actually scratch built an XFY1 Pogo, and he sent me pictures that he and some of the test videos and stuff. It was absolutely gorgeous, and it was scale, and I don't think he ever actually got to fly it off of a tether, but it was just this phenomenal airplane. And he recently sent me some pictures of Douglas 558, the Skyrocket, the V2 with the rocket in it. He scratch built one of those. He just sent me some pictures. It looks awesome, man. It's amazing.
Now those are one-off models that I'm guessing there's probably not any others in the world.
Oh no, none. Yeah, he and scratch built them, and yeah, it's awesome. So
yeah,
cool.
That's a different level of modeling, especially building a model that you know is probably not going to fly very well, or maybe not fly at all.
Yeah,
like that Pogo, I guess, with the counter-rotating props, and I don't know, it'd be a weird thing. It'd be a very, very weird thing. So, yeah, I think we're getting to the end of our time though here at the Hangout. Again, just a reminder, guys, we are going to be live on the hour, so at 6 o'clock Eastern. We're going to be on the Real Flight stream. And we're going to be flying with Chris, talking to him a little bit more about some of the airplanes in real flight. And then also, so that'll be at 6 Eastern. Pacific.
I thought it was 3.
Yeah. And then, yes, on the hour, in 15 minutes, we'll be doing that. And we will be live on YouTube and on Facebook as well. So you guys can stream it there and watch us there while we do some flying and talking. And again, if you guys have any other questions for Chris, you guys can ask those here now real quick in the next couple of minutes before we hop off. Also, you can join us on that and maybe ask some questions there. It's a little harder to see questions there and talk about those things there. But try and do it here if you can. And again, make sure that you subscribe to Chris's YouTube channel, the RC Geek. Check out his website. He does have those center burners available. You can purchase those to help support him. And again, it's even just watching the video is helping.
Random servo mover too.
What's that?
Random servo mover.
Oh, random servo mover. Yeah. Yes,
today. So I got to get one of those. But yeah. I
do have some, affiliate links on my videos as well. So if guys purchase hobby items through those affiliate links, that helps out the channel as well.
Yeah, good point, guys. We always click on the description, and within there, he'll usually have the items that were in the video with links. Yeah. And they'll go to our website or Amazon, depending on the product, and he gets a little bit of credit for that. So yes, that's another good way to support Chris and what he's doing, so he can keep bringing out cool videos, showing us all how to be modelers. true modelers, as some people say. So Craig did text me that airfoil that he used on the, and I can't imagine, maybe you'll know this off the top of your head. So it's a NACA 23012.
Okay.
23012. Yeah. Does that sound familiar?
I'm kind of surprised, actually. That's a relatively high Reynolds number airfoil. 5 series airfoil.
So oddly enough, it seems to work pretty friggin' well.
Yeah. I'll have to take a look at the shape of the airfoil. I'm sure. I mean, the 23012 I've seen, and from memory, it's a nice looking airfoil.
Are some nicer looking and sexier than others?
Well, no. What I mean is that
I can see that.
Really ugly looking airfoils. If you've done any kind of investigation, but what I mean is, something that's nice and streamlined, not too much camber or anything like that. So, yeah,
I think if I'm not mistaken, that one's symmetrical, fully symmetrical. Does that sound right? Or
012 would be, but I can't remember what the 23. I thought the 23 introduced. I don't know. Gosh, it's been a long time. Do you have a picture? I can't remember.
It's trying. Working real hard.
Come back.
Oh boy. Real quick, I'll answer this while we're looking that up.
So that okay.
Oh, you see it? I didn't see it yet.
Yeah, I just did a Google search.
Okay.
It's got kind of an interesting entry at the leading edge. Yeah, interesting. It does have some camber. It's not fully symmetrical. So the 23 at the beginning does introduce some camber into it.
Okay.
I can't remember what those numbers note on the 5 Series. But yeah.
That's cool that you do know that, though. Here's Newbie Wings real quick. So not every week we're going to have a new product announcement, but this show, if it's following our Thursday product announcement, we typically announce new products on Thursdays. We will talk about that product that following Friday. So nothing today. We did have the Night Timber X last week. We talked about. Here's a funny comment from David Hogue.
I have a random server.
Indeed, that's pretty funny, actually. Yeah, lots of Horizon logos. Oh, and I did see somebody else asked a question about new airplanes in real flight, and we brought this up a couple times, and we can talk about it in the real flight stream. But we're always working on new models for real flight. We usually roll them out with the updated release every year. So there always will be new planes in real flight. And don't forget, you can go to the real flight swap pages and download airplanes there as well. So there's thousands of airplanes there, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah.
Would that be a meat servo? A random servo?
Banned from the U.S. What?
What? Banned from the U.S.
Now I think the comments might be digressing. That usually happens when it gets late in the evening. Maybe people are already enjoying some adult beverages. Kind of thing.
What do you think I got in here? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, is that? Yeah, I bet it.
I've been sipping on margarita the whole time.
Oh man! Oh, it is your day off. You took the day off. That's right.
I did. I actually do have to call into a work meeting later tonight. So,
bummer.
Kind of a bummer, but
bummer.
Couldn't get around it.
And I did see. I don't know if he's still on, but I did see Cody was in here at one point.
Oh, cool.
He's on Facebook.
Hope he's doing well.
Yeah, he's good. He's packing up.
Oh, so he hasn't moved yet?
Not yet. That's happening this coming week, I believe.
Okay.
Yep, he found the place, and they went and checked out the school. He took a flight. I think the wife checked out her new digs, her new work, and they got a going away party tomorrow. I probably shouldn't tell you how he described what the atmosphere of this party is going to be like. It was sounds like a good time. We'll see. Hopefully the weather holds out and it'll be.
I didn't get an invite. That's so weird. Oh well.
We can ask him. So it's a little town north of here that I've never been to. So
no, that's really cool. Yeah, he's going to follow full scale aviation. That's awesome.
He is. He loves airplanes. He's like a lot of us. We just are enamored by all things that fly, whether it's full scale or a model. We appreciate it all. We're intrigued by it all. We're interested in it all. And for me, that's personally down the road here. I definitely will get my private pilot's license. Flying is not cheap and it's not super accessible for a lot of people. And I'm excited that Cody's going to have a chance to do it, all the time as his day job because he just loves airplanes.
That's
cool. Pineapple pizza, Cody. Yeah. If he's still on, I'll bring you some pineapple pizza tomorrow, Cody. All right. So, hey, guys, I think we're going to wrap it up here. And we will be again live here on the hour on the Real Flight stream. So that will be on the Horizon Hobby Facebook channel or Facebook page, also on the Horizon Hobby YouTube channel. So there are 2 YouTube channels, by the way, Horizon Hobby Products and Horizon Hobby. So the Real Flight will be on the Horizon Hobby channel. So if you're not subscribed to both, make sure you subscribe to both. Make sure you also subscribe to the RC Geek on YouTube as well. And then also like his page on Facebook to keep up with updates there. And also on YouTube, a lot of people forget this. You have to do the 2 things now. You have to not only subscribe on YouTube, but you also have to mash the bell to be able to get alerts when he's either live or has a new video, so on and so forth. So be sure to check those out. But thank you very much for joining us, Chris.
Hey, I really appreciate you guys having me. It's been fun.
Awesome. All right, guys. So I think we're going to sign off now. To everyone, hope you guys have a good Friday night, good weekend.
Thanks everyone for joining in.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks guys. We'll see you back on Real Flight. See ya.